Hello, and welcome to the Wittliff Collections, everybody. My name is Steve Davis. I'm our literary curator, and we're so pleased you can join us this evening as we all gather to celebrate the star writer Elizabeth Crook and her terrific new novel, The Madstone. Elizabeth.
Thank you.
So Elizabeth has been, this might be a good time to remind you to turn off your...
Oh, thank you, yeah.
Oh.
Me too, right?
And this is important, sorry. This is from my daughter in New York.
Do you need to take it?
She says, it's a text.
Oh.
I haven't been able to enjoy a book the same since finishing The Madstone.
Oh.
Isn't that sweet?
She's great. She's great.
Kids love the book.
Bone off.
So Elizabeth has been a dear friend and a longtime supporter of the Wittliff Collections. She has donated her literary papers, which provide a fascinating behind-the-scenes look at how she crafts her novels. These papers are available for study and research. They've often been exhibited here, delighting and inspiring visitors as well as Texas State students. We are honored to hold your archive here, Elizabeth, and I just want to say again, thank you so much for your continued generosity and support for the Wittliff Collections. We really appreciate it. It means a lot.
Honestly, can you hear me? Am I on? Yeah. No, okay. Oh, I have to turn a button.
No, you're on.
Oh, I'm on, okay. No, I'm just totally honored that you want my papers, that you had my papers with all of these really wonderful writers that are here. So, every time I come here, it feels like coming home. It's just amazing that this great collection, which is the star collection that I would have wanted these papers in, just happens to be in my hometown. So I feel always very comfortable here. So thank you, and I'm glad my papers
You're
are.
a great fit for this collection, that's for sure. So, you've all seen, I hope, that we have books for sale tonight. Elizabeth was going to be signing your copies this evening, and she's also going to be signing those extra copies that you'll want to buy for friends and family, anybody you want to impress, anybody you want to love you. They will be so happy you've done that, because the Madstone really is a treasure that should be shared. So keep that in mind when you make your purchases. Good. So Elizabeth Crook is the author of 6 acclaimed novels. She's won several major awards for her work. She is now officially enshrined as a Texas treasure, because it was this year that the Texas Book Festival presented her with its highest honor, the Texas Writer Award, in recognition of your substantial achievements in the literary arts. So congratulations again on that, Elizabeth. That's very cool to see. Made a lot of people happy with that news. And so for those of you, well, can I ask, who's all read The Which Way Tree? Raise your hand. Okay. And
Wow.
Those of us who love The Which Way Tree, I have to say, it's incredible to think, but you may actually like this new book even more. It's clear that Elizabeth has hit another home run, and The Madstone is winning rave reviews, including a remarkable endorsement this past Sunday from the prominent book critic Ron Charles in the Washington Post. He was obviously completely captivated by your novel, Elizabeth. He described it as, quote, a terrifically entertaining novel, honest and full of heart. He saluted Elizabeth as a master storyteller, and he judged that The Madstone is, quoting again, the perfect adventure to curl up with on some desolate winter night. So, as we turn our attention to The Madstone this evening, I have another question. Who here knows what a Madstone is? Raise your hand if you do. Is there anybody who wants to tell the rest of us what a Madstone is? Raise your hand. Anybody? Any volunteers?
Ryan's telling, yeah.
Yeah. So I've been talking about Madstone to Texas State students the past couple of weeks, and I tell them, basically, few of us have ever heard of that, but in the 19th century in Texas, everybody would know what a Madstone was, and it would be one of the most precious and sought-after artifacts you could have. These are sort of calcium deposits that can build up in the guts or in the stomach of ruminants, like deer particularly. They're pretty rare, apparently, but if you can find a good Madstone, this was the standard folk cure for anybody who basically was bitten by an animal with rabies. And so people would ride hundreds of miles, to use a Madstone if they'd been bitten and so forth. And it was the Texas author J. Frank Dobie who said that Madstones were basically 80 to 85% effective in curing rabies. And he pointed out that human beings in general have a natural immunity. 80 to 85% of humans are naturally immune to Madstone. So that's how it works out. But you definitely don't want to take a chance if you have nothing else. So before rabies vaccines, Madstones were the way to go. And and we actually have an exhibit on Elizabeth right now, celebrating her and the Madstone. And if you haven't seen it yet, it's kind of around the corner. If you come in the main entrance, you go to the right, you'll see this cool exhibit. And one of the special things about that is that we actually have an actual, authentic Madstone on display that was used here in San Marcos in the 1800s. This was kindly loaned to us by Ryan Patrick Perkins and his family. Ryan is an 8th generation resident of San Marcos, a leader in historic preservation here in Hays County. And Ryan is actually, in addition to loaning us the Madstone for this exhibit, is going to come up now and just tell us a little bit about this historic artifact.
I have to say how we found Ryan, though. Ryan contacted me when he knew I was writing a book about the Madstone, and he contacted me on Facebook and said, I have one. And I was so intrigued. And I thought I had noted who it was that had one, but I hadn't. And so later I wanted to track him down when you said you were doing this, display case. And so I went through all my messages on Facebook, trying to find, and I couldn't find the message from him. And I thought, well, maybe it was, some other way he contacted me. So then he showed up at my book signing in Austin at Book People and said that he was the person who had told me he had the Madstone. I was so excited because I knew that then we could ask him if we could possibly borrow it. So thank you, Brian, for, agreeing to that. Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you, Elizabeth. Is this on? Yeah, this is on. Again, my name is Ryan Patrick Perkins. I'm 8 generations here in San Marcos, and I am the keeper of our family Madstone. So I've written a few remarks that kind of tell the history of our family Madstone, including some controversy and some drama surrounding it, because it wouldn't be a good Texas story without some drama. In the heart of Texas, where legends whisper on the wind and history echoes off our ancient stones, I stand as the custodian of the Madstone, a relic imbued with tales of healing and steeped in family lore. The unassuming object, a porous, calcified substance believed to possess restorative powers against venomous bites, has been passed down through generations of my lineage, each entrusting with its safekeeping and the responsibility to uphold its mystique. Our family Madstone odyssey begins with Dr. John Llewellyn Payne, a revered physician in the frontier town of Stringtown and a budding village of San Marcos. A man of science and compassion, he embraced the Madstone's folklore, harnessing its unique properties to treat those afflicted by venomous bites and other strange ailments. Word of his success spread like wildfire, and the Madstone became a beacon of hope amidst the perils of an untamed wilderness. Derived from the stomach of a rare white stag, the Madstone was believed to draw the venom out of the body, offering a cure against deadly toxins of rabies and other serpents and other creatures. To activate its healing potential, the Madstone was boiled in sweet milk or alcohol, then applied to the wound while it was still warm, adhering firmly to the body. Once attached, the stone remained steadfast until it naturally fell off, at which point it was cleaned, reapplied until the milk no longer turned green, indicating the complete removal of the infection. Those who scoffed at the Madstone's effectiveness could find little solace in their skepticism, for often it stood as their last resort. Our family's Madstone origin remains shrouded in mystery. Some speculate that Dr. Payne acquired it from a local indigenous group, while others in the family believe that it came to him through his wife's family, the McGregors, who hailed from Inverswick, which is a village in East Lothian, Scotland. There, their Scottish heritage may have contributed to the belief in the ancient folk remedies, adding another layer of intrigue to the Madstone's provenance. The Madstone also finds literary residence in Sir Walter Scott's novel The Talisman, where a fictional gem with healing powers eerily mirrors the properties and the description of Dr. Payne's Madstone. Within our family lore, a sacred rule dictates that the Madstone must never be sold or used for personal gain. It is a priceless heirloom, once passed down from father to son, to each generation charged with safekeeping its legacy. In an unexpected turn of events, my great-grandfather, Dr. Payne's grandson, Oscar Llewellyn Payne, defied convention by entrusting the Madstone to his mother-in-law, Alice Roberts. Fondly known as Nanny, Alice was a mystic with deep roots in Stringtown and possessed an unwavering belief in the Madstone's healing powers. For nearly 5 decades, she embraced the stone wholeheartedly, frequently employing its properties to treat snake bites, animal bites, and other insect stings. Oscar's decision ignited a firestorm of controversy within the Payne family. Traditionalists fiercely opposed Nanny's involvement, arguing that her use of the healing stone violated the Madstone's patriarchal lineage and diminished its power. They believed that only male heirs were worthy of wielding its healing touch. The controversy intensified when Oscar's only son, Oscar Lee Payne, tragically passed away at the tender age of 17 after a bad fever. The family and San Marcos community were devastated. With no male heir to inherit the Madstone, its rightful owner shrouded in uncertainty, the tension within the Payne family reached a boiling point. In a bold move that defied generations of tradition, upon his death, Oscar bestowed the Madstone upon his daughter, my grandmother, Dorothy Lucille Payne Fraser Sims, known affectionately as Dottie.
Hey, Dottie.
He recognized in her compassionate spirit and unwavering determination the qualities of an ideal guardian for this mystic relic. Oscar's final decision further fueled the internal strife within the Payne family. Cousins clamored for the Madstone's return, insisting that it rightfully belonged to a male heir. Undeterred, Dottie, guided by her mother's wisdom, made a daring choice. She and her mother, Myrtle Beatrice Roberts Payne, Alice's daughter, Nanny's daughter, decided to hide the Madstone behind lock and key within the vault of the First National Bank in downtown San Marcos. Their voices hushed amidst the swirling controversy. As the Madstone lay dormant, its legend grew, whispering through generations of the Payne descendants. I vividly recall the hushed tones and the air of mystery that surrounded the Madstone when I was a child. I cherish the solemn moment when my grandmother revealed its existence, her retelling of its history filled with a mix of awe and responsibility. In 2016, upon her passing, I found myself the next custodian of this enigmatic relic. Today, as the guardian of the Madstone, I am actively aware of its legacy that I carry. The Madstone represents more than just a folklore remedy. It embodies the resilience of the human spirit, the unwavering belief of the unseen, and the enduring power of family traditions. As I carry on the mantle of guardian of the Madstone, I'm reminded of the profound responsibility that rests upon my shoulders. I'm not merely the keeper of an object, I'm the custodian of a legacy, a protector of a heritage that has spanned generations. I'm committed to honoring the Madstone's legacy, ensuring that the story continues to be whispered on the wind and echoed through the canyons of the ancient and sacred Texas Hill Country. Thank you, Elizabeth.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Ryan. And so here we are. We've known each other for several years. I've always thought of you as a very talented writer. And I confess I'm a little intimidated now because you've taken this leap into like the superhuman literary abilities with these last 2 books of yours. They've done so well. They're so amazing. I hear from people all the time who love your work. And so I just kind of want to begin by asking you, many of you read The Which Way Tree, and you may know that Benjamin Shreve is the narrator of this book. Just tell us a bit about Ben and how he became your voice for this book.
The stories, both stories, The Which Way Tree and The Madstone, are told by Benjamin Shreve. And as far as his voice and the way he speaks, I have just read so many firsthand accounts from that period of time, letters and journals and and autobiographies and that sort of thing. So the voice of people from then, it was so, I mean, their writing was just like their speaking. So it was very natural and unpracticed and untaught, and in that way really beautiful. I mean, if you've seen like the Civil War series, the Ken Burns Civil War series, and heard all those letters read, that is the way people wrote. And so I found this book when I was really searching for his voice. I found this book in the attic of a house that my grandmother had grown up in, and she had given it to my grandfather on his birthday. Oh no, it was a Christmas, and it was a journal, and it was written in this lovely language. And suddenly, reading that journal, I was like, I can do this. I found this. And once I found the voice, I knew the character. He's very earnest. He's very kind. He's really a dutiful person, and yet not boringly so, not tediously so. And so I just was able to take the language, and I wouldn't be able to speak it if you said that, but if you put my fingers on the keys, I can write it. And it just, it varies from that book. It's not a copy of that book. It's not a study of how he arranged his sentences or how many beats there tended to be, but it has the same sound to it. And then after I finished writing The Which Way Tree, I really just missed that character. I mean, I loved him. And, when you're writing, you spend all day with these people, I mean, you wake up, you have your coffee with these people, you're with them on and off all day, and then, late into the night often, because I often write at night, and they become very familiar. And when you finish a book, that's over. I mean, they're not going to say anything else. They're not going to do anything else. They're finished. And, there's a sadness to that. I mean, that's why I love talking to people who have read the books, because it brings, it's like running into people that you've known and loved and, haven't seen in a while. And anyway, so I missed him, and I wanted to age him up a couple of years and give him, a first love. There's a love story in the Madstone, and just hang out with him for another book, just kind of see the world through his eyes, for another book. So that's how this book, came to be. I mean, I'd barely finished with the Which Way Tree when I started sliding into, research for this. And aging him up required, just making him just 2 years savvier, 2 years smarter, not, I mean, he loses some of his gullibility, but not his earnestness. And then the language had to be just slightly better because he's read some books by now. So it was a little bit of a task just to do that, but once I settled into it, he's 19 in this story. When he's telling the story of The Which Way Tree, he's 17 when he's writing that.
Yeah, and he's plunged into another kind of incredible series of adventures, really. This is a road novel in a lot of ways. So, the characters that he's thrown in with. So this book is written as a letter to somebody in the novel. Can you tell us who that person is and Ben's relationship with him and his mother? Yes,
he's writing to a young child, but his instructions are that the child is not to read this till he's 19, because it has some adult matters in it. And this child comes into his life basically by accident. And Benjamin is tasked with getting him and his mother from Comfort, Texas, to Indianola, which was a port city. It was a large port city. It was second only to Galveston. It's where a lot of the German settlers and just where a lot of the settlers who came in from Europe came in. And it was later wiped out by hurricanes.
Okay, good. You're going to go there.
Yeah, totally destroyed by hurricanes. There's nothing left of Indianola. There is a historical marker that basically says this is where the town was, but it's sand now. And so he has to get them on, and he doesn't know when he starts out that he is going to be, that the journey at every juncture is going to become a longer journey. He thinks he's just hauling one person who, the coach went off with this guy's bag and he needed to catch up with it, and he's going to just take him as far as Bernie. And then, when they come across the stagecoach, they've caught up with it, but it's being robbed, and the passengers are Nell, whom Benjamin will fall in love with, and her little son Tot, whom he is writing this letter to. So then they have to see that they're safe and that they get where they're going. So at every juncture, he needs to go further and further until he has taken them all the way to Indianola.
And Elizabeth, can I ask you, you said the stagecoach has been robbed. Who robbed the stagecoach?
The stagecoach.
And what happened?
Yeah, and I mean, it is true. You had, these highway robbers that would pretend to be indigenous people. They would pretend to be Comanche, or they would just dress up with feathers in their hair or whatever, and so it would look like they were Indians, and they would commit crimes that way so that they would not be recognized. And so when he comes on the coach, it's being robbed, but then there's another set that's coming down. It's the parents of it's like a highway robbery of a highway robbery, and so the whole thing becomes very complicated. But he ends up with Nell and Dickie, this treasure hunter who had left his precious bag, holding a mysterious fortune in it, in the coach to begin with, and with Tot as his passengers after this highway robbery.
Yeah,
Yes.
and, the characters are just so much fun. You mentioned Dickie, who's a treasure hunter who gets sort of reluctantly pulled into this adventure, and you're never quite sure what to make of this person. And then there's Jorge Alvarez, is that his name?
Jorge. Jorge is a black Seminole, and he is kind of a mysterious figure in the beginning, but he ends up, being very much a part of the story and kind of saving the day. The Black Seminoles, that history is fascinating. I mean, I went down so many rabbit holes with that history. They basically were, enslaved people that escaped from, Alabama and Georgia and ended up going down to Florida and often intermarrying with the Seminole Indians. They lived with the Seminole Indians. They were enslaved by the Seminole Indians, but they had a much better life than they had in Georgia or Alabama or wherever they came from. And so they were mixed race, and they joined with the Seminoles when the Seminoles were sent to a reservation, and they were told it was going to be a really great reservation. Everything was going to be fine. They were going to really like it out there. And of course they got there, and it was hideous conditions. And so they packed up, the Seminoles and the Black Seminoles, and they hiked, this was hundreds of them, 900 miles from the reservation down to Mexico, because they had heard they could, find land there and be paid by the Mexican government to protect the border from people coming across from the north. Because at that time, the risk was, that everybody was so concerned about, there were Comanches that were coming in and kidnapping a lot of kids from Mexican families and raiding those farms, and there were lawless white people that were coming in to Mexico and just committing a lot of crimes. And so the border had to be protected. And so these Black Seminoles, who were known to be great fighters, were paid bounties, for every scalp that they took. And they protected the border. And then at the close of the Civil War, the U.S. government that had, of course, tried to subjugate them in Florida, knew what good fighters they were, and so they said, well, come back and fight for us and help us, protect and fight against these tribes out here. And so basically, Jorge just is done with it by then. He has a bad arm that doesn't work. He's been wounded. He's old, and he realizes that the U.S. government is not really going to make good on their promises, and so he decides to trek back to Florida and to his where he came from, be able to walk around there as a free person, and then go in search of his sister, who he is looking. He needs to find. She had been separated from him during the raids. So all the raids that happened from Jackson's army when they came down. So so he's on a journey of his own, and then he meets up with the wagon, with Benjamin and Nell and Tot. And the treasure hunter, Dickie, and so he joins.
And there's a lot going on. So I'm not sure if we said, but this is 1868. It's during Reconstruction.
Right.
And it's just, there's still a lot of kind of chaos and just a lot of bad people running around doing things. And so basically, Benjamin comes to the aid of this woman and her boy and tries to help them and gets caught up. And basically this chase that takes place across Texas, from her to Indianola.
Because she's being pursued by her husband. There were these gangs in East Texas, and the one that her husband is involved with is called the Swamp Fox Gang. And it was a real gang in history. They were not ready for the Civil War to be over. They did not like the federal government. They did not like blacks. They did not, and so they were preying on freedmen, freed women, and the people of the Freedmen's Bureau, who were, basically the federal government enforcers of the new laws. And so she is married to somebody who's in this gang, and she has sort of incrementally known what they are up to, the hideous deeds they have been doing, the murders they've been committing, but she's afraid of her husband, and she has not gone to the law in her mind, soon enough. So she is really, finally driven by her own sense of guilt, told on her husband and the gang she's told where they were hiding, and now she has to get away, and so that's where. That's the situation that she's in. She's gone west to be with people she knows, and then they have found her out there, and so now she's trying just to get to the border and get out of Texas to New Orleans, and that's when she meets up with Benjamin.
Yeah. It's just it's really a rollicking story. It's like this road trip across Texas, and I love how. You've obviously done so much historical research, but you don't really show that off. I mean, you just feel like you're there in the moment as these things are happening. So it's a lot of fun to read, and
because the trick with that, I mean, with writing the history, is really knowing what to leave out, because you don't want your readers to be, to feel like you're giving this history lesson of things that are extraneous to the story in any way. So you just learn it all, you really have to know it all, but then you have to know, what is absolutely relevant to drive the story forward or inform the reader about the characters, and just shed anything else that's extra, and to make the story move very quickly. And it's easy when you're doing that in first person, like with Benjamin, because Benjamin isn't going to explain a lot of details. He's just laying out the facts in the story as it happened. So it makes it easy when it's in first person to get to those things that are absolutely essential, to see the land, to know what's happening, but without any burdensome lecture of history.
Right. Yeah. And you know this, but I told you this a while back, but this was a really interesting book for our family, because my wife and I have two daughters who are in their 20s, we're empty nesters, and this was the first time as adults we've all read the same book. It's been since Goodnight Moon, probably, we've all read the same book. And one of the daughters, the one who actually texted me tonight, was not really a reader growing up. And she's gotten into reading just, now that she's out on her own and everything. she absolutely loved the Madstone. So this book really just means a lot to our family.
Thank
It's really
you.
sweet in that way. And I had this. I wrote down something about what the experience is for me reading a narrator like Benjamin Shreve, who is, like you said, he's so likable, but he's not, annoyingly so. I mean, he just seems very authentic. And, so I just wrote this note to myself. I wasn't sure I was going to say it, but what the hell. Basically, with Benjamin Shreve, it feels like you've tapped into some of the, Texas is so easily caricatured, and you have tapped in some of the best qualities associated with Texas. And this character and in this story, really, these are elements of Texas that have become submerged in recent years, but are still remembered fondly by many of us who have been around a long time. And those elements that I see are the open-minded generosity, the sly frontier humor, the careful attention to nature, and that bedrock sense of duty and honor. And it makes this book satisfying. And it's like, it shows us how people like Ben were in the past. There were a lot of people like Ben in the past. And I think it inspires people to look for the good today in some ways, in where we are, and to not lose sight of that. So I don't know, were you conscious of any of that sort of thing when you were writing it?
I mean, I love Texas. I mean, I so shamelessly love Texas. And yeah, I mean, I grew up with a lot of people like that. I mean, so this whole row I went to high school with me, and I mean, it's still that same feeling of community and of, we're all in it together. A sense I think that Texas holds that I don't know if the other states have it, but it really is part of who we are, I mean, I think people had to, from the beginning, look after each other in this state. And so, politics aside, I feel like people are good people in this state, and that all shows up in Benjamin.
Yeah, clearly so. And so let me ask, a lot of people know you grew up here in San Marcos. How did that influence you or impact your development into becoming a writer, just growing up in this place?
Right. I mean, I loved going to public schools here. Great teachers. Kelly Whitty's mom, Ms. Whitty, just a fabulous teacher. And Diane Klippel's mom. I mean, we had really good teachers at the high school. And we had, it was a very mixed group. It was very mixed, racially and economically and, in every way. But there was just so much companionship and very little, I mean, at least from my perspective, I did not feel a lot of contention. We were just all friends. And that is a lovely way to grow up. I'm so glad that I didn't end up, going off to school or something. I don't even think it was ever suggested, was it, Mom? I mean, I don't think there was any sense that we were, any of us, going off anyway.
The night you crawled home, it was suggested.
Oh, Sally says, but the night you crawled home, it was suggested. I've told Sally way too much, apparently, right? It was a very free, place to grow up. It was a safe place to grow up. I had horses, a colt I was training, and several of us, Amy, we all had horses out at Stortz's place, and we would ride every day after school, and so that was very wholesome, And then I also, my grandparents had a place out in the hill country where there was a lot of livestock, and so we were familiar with the behavior of goats and chickens and all of that. And then they lived in Corpus Christi, so the whole feeling of the coast. So I tried to kind of cover that whole landscape, in the Madstone. We go from the hill country all the way to the coast, and just the emotions of those places. Everywhere the air is different, and everywhere the landscape is different. And so these people are traveling at a much slower rate than we traveled today, but they are passing through all these places. And to me, that's Texas. I mean, I really have never spent much time in West Texas, far West Texas. And so I can't claim any familiarity there, but Central Texas, the Hill Country, the coast, very, they all feel, the whole place feels like home to me.
Interesting. And I know we've had you for events before, and you've talked about growing up in a family of readers and how your mother read to all of you growing up and all of that. And I noticed that you dedicated this book to your Uncle Charles. Tell us why you did that.
Yeah, because, he's just great, a great person. Charles Butt is my uncle, is who he's talking about. And I just love him. And, as an adult, I've become close to him, and he was always, so sweet to us when we were kids. And it just seemed like the right book to dedicate to him.
Yeah, I bet.
And so, yeah, that was good. It was a good, I was very fortunate to grow up in a family that had books to begin with, and that that loved books, and that valued what it turned out I was going to do. I mean, there was nothing else. I mean, Mom will tell you, I tried playing the guitar. Nobody wanted to hear me play anything again. It was just like, they were not saying play that again. So, but then I would write something, mediocre something or other, and then they'd say, well, that's nice. That's pretty good. And so, we kind of started to gravitate toward, all three of us, toward what we could do well. And for me, it was writing. I had heard a lot of stories. Mom read to us every night religiously, and read a lot of good stuff to us, and that was very influential. And it was a family of journal keepers and diary keepers and letter writers, and my great grandfather, when he came over, he had been headmaster of a school in England, and he came over here with his son. His wife died in childbirth. He came over with his son, and they tried to settle in South Texas, that thorny mesquite area, and he couldn't get the house to stand up. I mean, they had everything happen. The livestock would be washed away, the house would fall down, and because he was an academic, he didn't know, But then his son learned how to become an engineer, moved to Mexico, and was an engineer in Mexico until the Mexican Revolution, and knew Pancho Villa, and then moved back when the revolution became really violent, and so, we settled in at that time, and have been here ever since. So
Interesting. And I'm going to open it up to questions here in a minute, but I want to ask one more thing. Just since you mentioned the topic of violence, I know that's come up in a couple of your previous sessions at Book People and at the Book Festival, so I have to ask too. So the issue of violence that comes up in the novel.
yeah. There's a lot of violence, and I actually love writing violent scenes. It's because I get to write them. I mean, they're all, somebody once called my attention that she said, do you realize that all of your books have massacres in them, except the first one? And I hadn't really thought of that, but to me, what drives a story is conflict and risk. And if your characters are not at risk, then I don't care about them. If it's just, if they're just kind of having troubles in their, daily life or whatever, I'm just not that worried. But, if their life is in danger, I'm concerned. And so I can get more invested in who that character is and what they're up against, and can essentially care about them more. And so I love to have my characters at risk. And the violence in this book, it's mostly very funny. Because it's told through Benjamin's point of view, and it happens to the bad guys. And so, the thing about it, with writing violence, I don't like violent movies. I don't like reading other people's violent literature. But when you're writing it, you are pulling those strings. You're in total control. You can stop pulling the strings. You can put whatever connotations on it you want. You can bring in the mood, you can change the light, can any way you want to handle it, it's all your deal. And that is very comforting and very fun. And there's a lot that happens that's bad, but it's really to the bad people mostly. So
Yeah, it's pretty satisfying. So we have a few minutes. We'd love to hear questions from you all, and we have Hector and Michael have microphones. So just raise your hand or stand up, and we'll get you a mic, and you can ask Elizabeth whatever you like.
I really enjoyed the book, and congratulations, the Madstone. The very end left me a little bit, not uncomfortable, but I was worried that Tot wasn't going to make it till he was 19 to read it. Did you do that intentionally?
Tot makes it. He makes it. Yeah, he does. And I won't say a whole lot about the end because my friend Kelly told me she was listening to it on the way up here, and she said, I'm right to the part where, something's happening in the field, but I don't want you to say anything that might give away the ending. So I won't give away the ending. But I really like an ending on a book that isn't, I don't want a tragic ending. I don't want a happy ending. I don't want an ending that wraps everything up totally, but I don't want an unsatisfactory ending. And I feel like with this book, you know enough about about what's going to happen in the future to let it go. And I mean, not let it go, because you don't want a reader to totally let it go. When they put a book down, you want them to keep feeling and thinking what if and how, but you want them to not to feel like you just dumped them in the middle of nowhere, without a satisfying ending. So I feel like with all of my books, there's a bittersweet quality. There's a little bit of a nostalgia, but there's not a tragedy as far as where it's leaving the characters. So.
Yeah. Okay. Who else has a question for Elizabeth? Who else went to school with Elizabeth and wants to share dirt? We're ready. This is all being recorded for posterity, so this is the time to let it go.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yes. Mary. Hector's got a mic for you, Mary.
When you were talking about the history and all the history you read, and how you didn't want to burden the writer with it, when Benjamin was telling the story, every once in a while he would maybe want to take a diversion.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But he said, no, I have to go back to the story. Mm-hmm. Was it there that you were attempted to talk more about history, or?
Yeah, probably. I mean, with the history, basically, you do all this research. I mean, stacks and stacks of books that I've read through and made notes in, underlined things in, fascinating stuff, really interesting stuff. And, but, you can't then punish the reader and say, well, because I had to learn all of this, you also have to know all of this. And a lot of people who write history, in one form or another, fiction or nonfiction, are very excitable people when it comes to the history. You get very excited. But you have to realize, put yourself in the reader's point of view. They only have so much time, They are in it for the story. They're not in it for the history lesson. And if it happened, one county over from, where your story is taking place, or just a few years earlier or later, you don't have to have your character mention it or talk about it or whatever, because that is just going to be burdensome. So I used to put it all in there and then have to strip it out. And the example that I always use to describe that is it's like you're in a boat and you get too much stuff in there and it starts to sink. And you've got to throw out whatever you don't need. And I would have to do that with every book. The saving grace of writing in Benjamin's voice and in first person is that this narrator is only gonna say the essential stuff. So that, for instance, if you were writing from a third person point of view, this is the example I've given before, but I'll repeat it because I think it's telling. if you were going to say they made a fire, you would need to know from third person. You would think, okay, all right, did they have matches? Were matches readily available? Were they expensive? Were they perhaps a shortage of matches because there's, the blockade on the coast during the Civil War and there was a shortage of everything? And you would have to know all of that. And you wouldn't want to say all of that, but you would have to say a little bit of it. They got the matches and whatever. But Benjamin's just going to say, we made a fire. He's not going to go into any of that. So it really lightens it when you realize that you're writing specifically through the mind of this young man and how he's going to tell this story. He's not going to explain to this child how they made the fire. He's just going to say, we made the fire. And so it makes it so enjoyable to write because, for one thing, you don't have to know how they made the fire. You don't have to know about the matches and the whole thing. But you can just, you're just free just to move along with the story. And so, yeah, that is where, I find the history, I actually do know about the matches. I learned a lot of that stuff, but it makes it very easy to write the scene because I don't have to inject any of those details. Yeah.
Great. And I think we have time for another question.
Just following up on the historical kind of research part of this, I just wrote a historical novel as well, and the part that I really struggled with in the history part is what is the fine line between being, the accuracy in terms of the historical research and then making the story actually really interesting and enjoyable, especially if you're going to have real historical people in your novel. Because I found that I would be like, oh, well, this character would just be so much better if he was not 19 but 22, right, at this time.
Right.
And so I've changed a lot of those historical facts, but then I also don't know at what point would that make historians angry.
Well, there are a lot of ways to go with that, and different people do it differently. And I remember Bill Wittliff telling me, I was being so conscientious about everything when I wrote a book I published in 1994 called Promised Lands, and I was struggling with how to get the Army to, I needed my characters to get to where the Army was, and it was X number of miles, and they were on, they only had one, mule pulling the wagon, and how fast could that wagon actually go, and there was all of this stuff. And Bill said, move the Army. And I was like, yeah. And I was saying, but that's not where the Army is. So there are different ways to do it. Bill would have felt free to move the Army. And he would have, the Army would have been just fine where he put it, it would have, that's the way he could do it. And I don't feel I can get by with that. I feel I have to really stick to the facts and not deviate from them. But, if you look at Lonesome Dove, there are lots of things that aren't true to the history, those have all been called to the attention of readers, but that just make the story good and make the story move, and they got by with it. And but I did one time. I had the scene in Promised Lands where there are some fireflies, and it was too early for the fireflies to be out in the year, and I knew this, but I wanted those fireflies, and I put that. So the fireflies are out in this scene. Let's see, that book was 1994. About 5 years ago, so how many years would that be? I got an email from an entomologist. Now, I am not kidding you. Through my website saying, did you know that your fireflies came out too early in the year? So, some of this stuff will come back to haunt you if people know, but it's a choice. You can move the Army, or you can, figure out how to get that mule to go faster, or you can have your character find some other way to get there. But it just is, there are a lot of options with it. The rules are very sketchy. I try to stick with the facts of the history as the backbone because it gives me security to know, okay, these are the facts I have to work with. This is the scaffolding, and I have to maneuver within this scaffolding. But yeah, there are those people who don't want the scaffolding. Sally, did you have that? Yeah.
Well, you know what Dobie said. This is a quote from Dobie.
Yes.
And don't let facts get in the way of truth.
Yes, yes. I know, and that's what Bill was trying to say to me. And, yeah, I just couldn't do it. I mean, the facts just would have, I wouldn't have slept at night. Bill would have slept great doing it, yeah. But I just had to keep the facts, yeah.
All right, we're going to sneak in one more question. Yes.
Elizabeth, I was waiting for someone to ask the follow-up question, so I'll do it. Based on the satisfactory ending we're all going to experience as we read the book, is there an opening for a Benjamin trilogy?
Well, I have been asked this
I'm
before,
sure.
yes, and I stumble over it, Tim. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I don't feel like diving in. I mean, it's hard to write a book. I mean, it's really hard. It's a lot of research and figuring out how old would he be, when would I come in, how would I age him up. If I age him up too much, he loses his, whatever that quality is. I mean, he doesn't become a cynic, but there's some quality he has as a very young person. The voice changes. He has to become a little more literate. There are a lot of things that would have to change unless I made him just like 1 year old or 2 years old or something like that. So I toy with all those. I have, started kind of poking around with some research to see what would it be like if, and I've thought, okay, so what if Talk comes back when he's 19 after he's read this account and, wants to go look for Samantha who was lost in the Which Way Tree. What about this or that? And so I am very much toying with the idea, but I don't know. I really honestly don't know if I'll go that direction or just veer off to, something entirely different. I mean, my previous books were completely different time periods and different style, and everything else. But it is fun to write as Benjamin,
So we'll take that as a maybe.
Yeah, that's a maybe. That's a maybe. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And so I just want to say you all have been a terrific audience. Don't forget to take a look at the Madstone we have on exhibit. We have books for sale here. Elizabeth's going to sign copies. Thank you all, and thank you, Elizabeth, for this evening. Thank you. We appreciate it very much.